You know, 1,000 subscribers is one of the feats that I didn't think I would reach at this channel at such a fast rate, but I'm happy to know that 1,000 plus people are as interested in the world of ant keeping as much as me. So, with that said, I'll be your host for this ant room tour. Let's begin with a colony that has been recently showcased, but hasn't been seen in a while. This is the ever so growing fire ant colony, Solenopsis xyloni, in their cubes and tube setup known as the desert dunes. Their old test tube ran out of water, so it is time to give them a replacement. But before we move them back, let's take a look inside their nest. Lots of brood, eggs, and pupa from what I can see, and I can estimate about 50 plus workers. They also use some of their substrate to mold their nest, which I thought was pretty neat. After some time, I also spotted the queen, who was getting constantly groomed by her workers. I rarely saw the inside of the colony, so it was assuring to see them still thriving. But let's go ahead and give them their new test tube, which they'll move into when they feel ready. All I have to do left is to cover their new test tube and wait until time passes. One of my favorite parts about this colony is the way they take in food. Give them any insect and they come swarming their prey. They completely emptied out this cockroach after a couple of days. Their outworld has changed a bit since then, as this was back in the beginning of September, so let's fast forward 3 months in and see how they are doing. Within these 3 months, the colony's size increased significantly, and that was shown through some workers digging behind the test tubes. Moving on to another thriving species is my Dorymyrmex bicolor colony. They are the new residents for the mini hearth formicarium, and I also found out that they enjoy raw honey. Since I left their original test tube inside the outworld, it took them a few days to actually move in. Even though it is still winter, I still saw a few eggs and larvae, and this later increased as time went on. As the usual, I gave them a Galileo liquid ant feeder, and put it into their outworld. And soon enough, a worker came by to take its fill. Two months later, as I said before, the colony's brood pile has started to grow, and more workers were closing here and there. I also noticed that they cleaned up a bit in the corner of the formicarium and taken food whenever I give them fresh insects. Now that they were settled in, it was time to give them a sunburst ant nectar filled feeder from which they can drink from when needed. A quick sneak peek at my desk where I keep my main setups. And we're off to my shelf where I have most of my Brachymyrmex queens that I plan on selling. During the summer, this species had non-stop flights.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible.
Currently, I only have 2 colonies in enclosures, and one of them is nesting in the water tower of the Talus formicarium. And the colony in a cubes and tubes setup isn't doing too well, so I'll have to move them out. My other colonies that are still in test tubes have a few workers but more room to grow, so they'll be in there for a while. Onto our next enclosure, which I have named the Cliffside, closely resembles my previous enclosure. This one just has sticks poking out and larger rocks. But I have to say, I am loving these twigs in their enclosure. When I first added these in, I saw a couple workers climbing on them, so I'm hoping they'll forage more on these twigs when the temperature gets warmer. I gave them another test tube also, in hopes of them moving in since they have run out of water in their main one. But I've only seen a few workers there, visiting for a drink, so I'm hoping they'll use it in the future. Using this moss for a future enclosure seemed like a great idea, so all I had to figure out was which colony should be moved in. And like the same reason for some of my other colonies, I decided to have my Crematogaster CF coarctata be the inhabitants for this new setup. Checking over this video, I realized that I forgot to put a drainage layer, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem as I won't be watering this place too much.
Why is this so hard? I don't want to fight on
The good thing about some of these moss pieces is that they have little sprouts growing off of them, making the future of this enclosure more dense in vegetation. With this now finished, we can now add them in. Always have to be sure that they have access to water. And this colony is set to go. Only time will tell how they do in this kind of environment. On to even more recent news, I decided to make an enclosure for my other Crematogaster colony. I wanted it to be different compared to my previous enclosures, so I decided to use a much larger layer. The substrate, red sand, and also 2 large rocks, and a bunch of sticks poking out. This already looked really sweet, and since I have already named my past 3 enclosures, what do you think we should name this moss setup and this twigs, sand, and large rocks enclosure? Leave your suggestions in the comment section down below, and I'll choose my favorites and we can have a poll on it in the next video. But my suggestions for the moss setup is pine brush, and this more recent one, the valley. They might be a bit plain, but I like those kinds of names. My newest colony is this founding colony of Camponotus sansabeanus, and when I first received the queen, she had 2 workers and a few larvae, but she lost one of the workers since then and has refilled her gaster after I fed them apples for the past few weeks of acquiring them. What I heard from the majority of people who keep Camponotus, they are said to be very slow growers. So my main focus is getting this colony to at least 20 workers by the end of summer. I also try to get as much footage as possible to prevent any stress, as I noticed my queen to be very light sensitive. Another video of this colony will be coming soon, so stay tuned for that. Once again, thank you for supporting me, liking my videos and commenting, and if you haven't already, follow me on my Instagram. I'm always active on there and try to respond to every message I get. I provide sneak peeks on my story there too, so be sure to follow there like I said before. Thank you to those who already follow me there, but I'm afraid this is all the time that I have for now, and I really appreciate you watching this far. And another special thanks to those who sent me a picture of their queens or colonies through Instagram and email. If you want me to feature your queens or colonies in a future video, you can send me a message through Instagram, Discord, or by email. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a festive winter holiday, and see you soon, fellow antkeepers.